In this podcast episode, Melissa Ackerman reveals the often overlooked realities of produce supply chains in America, discussing the massive scale of food waste, the challenges farmers face, and the disconnect between excess produce and food insecurity. She explores issues around consumer perceptions, supply chain logistics, and the importance of supporting American farmers while highlighting innovative efforts to utilize surplus crops for community impact. Melissa explains that many consumers are unaware of where their produce truly comes from. With about 60% of American lettuce grown near San Francisco, California, this concentration represents a vulnerability, particularly with rising costs making it difficult for farmers to sustain operations. She emphasizes that huge quantities of crops, such as 400 million pounds of strawberries, are left unharvested annually simply because they do not meet grocery store size and appearance standards, not because of quality or taste. The supply chain's inefficiencies prevent excess produce from reaching those in need, despite frequent local shortages. Melissa recounts how, during the pandemic, the widespread closure of restaurants and schools dramatically disrupted demand, leaving farmers and distributors with surplus inventory that lacked an efficient pathway to food banks or charitable organizations. The problem stems from an inflexible supply chain that isn't equipped to redirect the excess from farms to communities experiencing food insecurity. Melissa discusses how grocery stores impose strict size and uniformity specifications on produce, leading to unharvested crops that don't fit visual criteria. These standards dictate what pickers harvest in the field, sometimes leaving perfectly good produce, whether smaller, larger, or irregularly shaped, on the ground or remains on trees. This system prioritizes appearance over nutritional or taste value and ultimately contributes heavily to food waste. Contrary to the idyllic image many hold of small farmers tending one-acre plots, Melissa stresses that modern produce farming is a large-scale commercial enterprise, often spanning hundreds or thousands of acres and backed by private equity and venture capital. The system involves complex logistics, labor crews, and distribution networks that operate similarly to other commodity businesses. This reality often clashes with consumer perceptions but is critical to understand for anyone interested in food systems. Melissa shares her grocery shopping approach focused on buying stages of produce, such as varying levels of banana ripeness, to reduce waste at home. She advocates for a cultural shift where consumers embrace produce that might not look uniform but is still delicious, akin to European markets where odd shapes and sizes are common. Such change could help demand more of what farmers grow and reduce the amount left unharvested. While waste is a global issue, Melissa notes each region has unique challenges. For example, the U.S. imports canned and frozen peaches from Mediterranean countries like Spain and Greece, pointing to opportunities for increased domestic sourcing. Measuring and addressing worldwide produce loss remains a challenge pursued by organizations like the World Wildlife Fund, which is developing tools to quantify and address food waste precisely. Melissa envisions an American grocery model inspired by Australia's odd bunch sections, where excess or irregular produce is prominently displayed and sold at reasonable prices. This approach would make seeking out surplus produce a mainstream consumer habit, increasing access to nutrient-dense food while reducing waste. She stresses that raising consumer awareness and demanding diverse specifications could create a sustainable, full-harvest marketplace. Before founding her impact business, Melissa ran one of the nation's largest produce management and transportation companies, supplying major chains like Panera and Starbucks. When the pandemic shut down many restaurant clients, her company pivoted to saving the supply chain by participating in the USDA's Farmers to Families Food Box program, distributing over 9 million food boxes filled with fresh produce and proteins to charities. Through this, Melissa met and partnered with Ivanka Trump, whose government role helped catalyze relief efforts and grow their shared mission. This $6 billion USDA initiative, championed by Ivanka Trump, provided critical support to farmers and distributors whose restaurant clients had closed. It enabled bulk produce to be repackaged and delivered directly to those in need through 501c3 organizations. Melissa credits the program with sustaining multiple businesses and the overall supply chain during the pandemic, saving livelihoods and creating a model for future crisis response. Melissa praises Ivanka as a visionary partner who champions scalable, impactful solutions. She highlights Ivanka's focus on measurable results, farmers impacted, pounds redistributed, and people served, as core motivators. Ivanka's strategic thinking challenges Melissa to envision nationwide change beyond pilot projects, emphasizing the importance of dreaming big while executing effectively. Melissa recounts deeply emotional moments spent in fields with multi-generational farm families who have struggled to maintain profitability and keep farms viable. Many farmers expressed gratitude for being heard and acknowledged, something rare in an industry often driven by market demands and appearance standards. Melissa's work centers on bringing respect and sustainability back into American farming communities. Partnering with the World Wildlife Fund, Melissa is involved in projects piloting acceptance of number 2 produce, such as imperfect strawberries, in institutional settings like cafes at Stanford and Google. These initiatives explore fresh, creative culinary uses for non-standard produce, testing how to expand consumer acceptance while ensuring farmers receive fair payment to cover costs and reduce waste. Farmers face rising input costs, including labor and water, compounded by international competition, where subsidies and lower wages reduce prices for imports. This economic pressure makes farming less viable domestically, increasing the risk of diminished local production, especially in heavily concentrated growing regions like California. Consumer demand for fresh produce is rising, but systemic financial challenges risk supply shortages. With approximately 60% of lettuce grown in specific areas of California and Arizona, there is concern about the vulnerability of supply chains subjected to climate, labor, or regulatory pressures. Attempts to diversify growing methods, including hydroponics and growing in microclimates, are ongoing but not yet sufficient to offset risks of losing these critical production hubs. Melissa and Ivanka have leveraged their partnership to respond swiftly to disasters, distributing culturally appropriate fresh produce and staple foods in crisis zones such as after the Miami fires, Maui wildfires, and hurricane impacts in Jamaica and Texas. Their model ensures quick local sourcing and sensitive packaging that meets situational needs, including considerations for power outages and cooking limitations. Melissa encourages a realistic view that while supporting local farmers is valuable, access to fresh produce year-round requires a complex, integrated supply chain involving large-scale farms and wider regional networks. She cautions against romanticizing all food sourcing as small-scale or exclusively local, underscoring the importance of scale and diversity in meeting national nutritional needs. Melissa urges consumers to demand and accept produce that looks different from perfect standards, encouraging a shift in mindset to prioritize taste, nutrition, and farmer livelihoods over appearance. She also invites companies and individuals to partner with her organization, Planet Harvest, to find new ways to source and distribute surplus fresh produce to underserved communities. Programs like Section 32 facilitate purchase of excess crops for schools and food banks, but often maintain stringent grade and size requirements that continue to exclude large quantities of edible produce. Melissa highlights ongoing conversations about updating grading systems to allow more imperfect produce into institutional meal programs, but acknowledges that regulatory and market shifts take time. Melissa is frustrated by oversimplified narratives that ignore the immense coordination, labor, and logistics required to move perishable produce from farm to consumer within tight timeframes. She advocates for greater public appreciation of this complexity, emphasizing that fresh produce supply is a race against the clock, unlike shelf-stable goods. Melissa observes a tension between grassroots and large-scale market approaches in how food is discussed publicly. While many influencers champion small farm ideals, systemic food supply depends on mass production and distribution to achieve broad accessibility. Bridging this gap through education and innovation is a key challenge ahead. By working with organizations like WWF and Stanford, Planet Harvest develops data-driven solutions that track food loss and test new market pathways. Pilots with chefs and distributors help build proof of concept for mainstreaming use of imperfect produce at scale. Balancing her role as a mother of three with entrepreneurship, Melissa credits organization and delegation at home and work. She surrounds herself with a strong, predominantly female team, empowering others to lead in their expertise areas. For her, leadership combines clear vision with trust in others' capabilities. Melissa's core advice is to eat and love produce without judging it solely by looks. She encourages people to think about the journey produce takes, the farmers behind it, and the impact of reducing waste. She asks consumers to expand their perceptions of beauty and accept imperfect produce as beautiful and worthy of support.